The neon lights of Tokyo often mask stories hidden in the shadows. In June 1978, one such story began to unfold, though few recognized its sinister nature at the time. Yo Uchi, a vibrant 22-year-old single mother, was working hard to support her two young children. She had a job at the Cabaret Hollywood, a popular night spot in the bustling city. One evening after her shift concluded around midnight, Yo Uchi simply vanished. She did not return home to her children, nor did she contact any friends or family to explain her absence, which was entirely out of character for the devoted mother and responsible employee. Her sudden disappearance caused initial, albeit localized, concern. Her manager at the Cabaret Hollywood, faced with her unexplained absence, made an assumption. He, along with some of her colleagues, perhaps thought she had found a better opportunity or had personal reasons to leave abruptly. They likely concluded that Yo Uchi had simply decided to quit her job without formal notice. This was a common enough occurrence in the transient world of nightclub employment. The idea that something far more nefarious had occurred, something beyond a simple personal choice, did not immediately take root in their minds. The city was vast, and people sometimes drifted away, seeking new lives. The initial investigation by local police, likely treating it as a standard missing person case, did not yield any significant leads. There were no ransom demands, no notes left behind, and no witnesses to her departure from the vicinity of the Cabaret Hollywood. For her worried family, the lack of information was agonizing. They could not accept that she would abandon her children. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, with no word from Yo Uchi. The trail grew cold and her case file was likely relegated to the growing stack of unsolved disappearances that any major metropolis accumulates over time. The truth behind Yo Uchi's disappearance was far more terrifying than anyone in her immediate circle could have imagined. She had not chosen to leave. She had been forcibly taken, a victim of a clandestine state-sponsored operation. Her identity, her life, and her future were stolen from her on that fateful night. Her children were left motherless, their lives forever marked by her unexplained absence. At this point, however, her case was just one among many, a personal tragedy not yet connected to a larger, more disturbing pattern of abductions orchestrated by a foreign power, North Korea, which was systematically targeting Japanese citizens. Throughout the late 1970s and into the early 1980s, unsettling rumors began to circulate within certain circles in Japan. These whispers spoke of Japanese citizens vanishing under mysterious circumstances, particularly from coastal areas. Some of these hushed conversations pointed a finger towards North Korea. The theory was that North Korean spies were abducting Japanese nationals. These individuals were allegedly being taken to teach the Japanese language and culture to North Korean agents. Others were supposedly kidnapped so their identities could be stolen and used for espionage activities in Japan or South Korea, allowing operatives to blend in seamlessly. These rumors, however, were largely confined to the fringes. The general public remained mostly unaware or skeptical of such dramatic claims. The Japanese government at the time also appeared to dismiss these stories. They were often treated as conspiracy theories, lacking concrete evidence that could substantiate such extraordinary allegations against a sovereign nation. The idea of state-sponsored kidnappings on Japanese soil seemed too far-fetched for many officials to seriously entertain. The Cold War was in full swing, and international relations were complex, making such accusations highly sensitive and potentially damaging without irrefutable proof. Law enforcement agencies generally investigated disappearances as individual criminal cases, not as part of an international plot. The families of those who had disappeared, however, found these rumors deeply troubling, yet also, in a strange way, a potential explanation for the inexplicable. For people whose loved ones had vanished without a trace, the official explanations often felt inadequate. The notion of a deliberate abduction, while horrifying, at least offered a reason, however sinister, where often there was none. These families began to connect with each other, sharing their stories and their fears. They started to wonder if the scattered disappearances were not isolated incidents, but part of a coordinated campaign. Their pleas for more thorough investigations often met with polite but ultimately unhelpful responses. Despite the growing unease among these families, the official stance remained largely unchanged for several years. The narrative of North Korean abductions struggled to gain traction in mainstream discourse or governmental action. The lack of direct proof, the diplomatic implications, and perhaps a reluctance to acknowledge such a significant security breach on Japanese territory all contributed to this initial dismissal. It would take a dramatic and violent international incident, coupled with a startling confession, to finally force a reassessment of these persistent rumors and bring the horrifying truth into the harsh light of day, shaking the foundations of Japan's understanding of its security. The turning point in understanding the scope of North Korean abductions arrived unexpectedly and violently in November 1987. Korean Airlines Flight 858, en route from Baghdad to Seoul, exploded in midair over the Andaman Sea, tragically killing all 115 people on board. This act of terrorism shocked the world and led to an intensive international investigation. 2 North Korean agents were identified as the perpetrators. One agent, an older man, died by suicide using a cyanide capsule when they were apprehended by authorities in Bahrain. The other agent, a younger woman named Kim Hyun-hui, was successfully taken into custody before she could also take her own life. During her subsequent interrogation by South Korean authorities, Kim Hyun-hui began to unravel a complex tale of espionage, indoctrination, and state-sponsored terror. She confessed to her role in the bombing, stating that the order had come directly from the highest levels of the North Korean regime. But her confession contained another bombshell, one that would send shockwaves across the Sea of Japan. She revealed crucial details about her training as a North Korean spy. To enable her to impersonate a Japanese citizen convincingly for covert operations, she had been taught the Japanese language, customs, and mannerisms by a Japanese woman who, Kim claimed, had been abducted to North Korea. Kim Hyun-hui identified her Japanese language instructor by the name Lee Un-hai. She described this woman in detail, providing information about her life in North Korea. Investigators, cross-referencing this information with unsolved missing person cases in Japan, made a startling connection. The description and timeline provided by Kim Hyun-hui strongly matched those of Yo Uchi, the young mother who had disappeared from Tokyo in June 1978. It became apparent that Lee Un-hai was the name Yo Uchi had been forced to use in North Korea. The Japanese government suddenly had credible testimony linking North Korea directly to the abduction of at least one of its citizens. This revelation was a game-changer. It provided the first solid evidence from a credible source, a captured North Korean agent, that the rumors of abductions were not mere conspiracy theories but a horrifying reality. The case of Youchi, now often referred to by her Japanese name Yeiko Taguchi, using her maiden name as is sometimes customary in discussing abductee cases, became a pivotal point. The public and the government could no longer easily dismiss the abduction claims. Kim Hyun-hui's testimony indicated Yeiko Taguchi had been forced to teach Japanese to spies for approximately 3 years, confirming the very purpose of the abductions that had been rumored for so long. The tragic bombing of Cal 858 inadvertently shed light on another equally sinister state crime. Years of mounting evidence and persistent campaigning by the families of the disappeared eventually led to a diplomatic breakthrough, albeit a fraught one. In September 2002, then-Japanese Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi made a historic visit to Pyongyang for a summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-il. During this meeting, North Korea, in a stunning reversal of its long-held denials, finally admitted to abducting a number of Japanese citizens. Kim Jong-il offered a verbal apology, attributing the kidnappings to some people in special forces agencies who he claimed got carried away by adventurism and heroism, a statement many found difficult to believe given the nature of the North Korean regime. Following this admission, North Korea stated that 5 of the abductees were still alive and permitted them to return to Japan for a temporary visit. These individuals were Yasushi Chimura and his wife Fuki Hamamoto, Kaoru Hasuike and his wife Yukiko Okudo, and Hitomi Soga. Their emotional reunions with their families in Japan were broadcast across the nation, bringing a human face to the years of suffering. However, the Japanese government, after their arrival, decided that these 5 would not return to North Korea as initially agreed, a decision that further complicated relations but was widely supported by the Japanese public, who feared for their safety if they went back. For the families of other abductees, North Korea's disclosures brought mostly devastation. Pyongyang claimed that 8 other officially recognized victims had died, and that 4 others they were accused of taking had never entered the country or their entry could not be confirmed. They provided death certificates for some, citing causes such as gas poisoning, heart attacks, and traffic accidents. However, these documents were riddled with inconsistencies and lacked credibility. The international community and the Japanese government viewed these explanations with deep skepticism, questioning the circumstances and timing of the alleged deaths, many of which were claimed to have occurred relatively young and from unnatural causes. The deception deepened when North Korea provided what it claimed were the cremated remains of Megumi Yokota, who was abducted at age 13. However, independent DNA testing conducted in Japan on these remains revealed they were not Megumi's. In fact, the remains contained DNA from multiple unrelated individuals, a discovery that caused immense outrage and pain in Japan. This blatant attempt at deception led the Japanese government and the families to believe that North Korea was lying about the deaths of many abductees, and that more victims might still be alive, held against their will. North Korea's handling of the issue severely damaged any trust that might have been built by the initial admission. Section 5. The True Scale, Counting the Stolen Lives. The Japanese government, officially recognizes 17 of its citizens as victims of abduction by North Korean agents between 1977 and 1983. This official list includes individuals like Megumi Yokota, Yaeko Taguchi, and Keiko Aramoto, whose stories have, become symbols of this national tragedy. These 17 names represent cases where the government believes there is sufficient evidence to confirm North Korean involvement. However, the grim reality is that this number is widely considered to be only the tip of the iceberg. Many researchers, non-governmental organizations, and defectors from North Korea suggest the actual number of abducted Japanese nationals could be, significantly higher. Investigations conducted by groups supporting the families and analysis of defector testimonies point towards potentially dozens or even hundreds of other unresolved missing person cases that might be connected to North Korean abductions. Some estimates, though difficult to verify definitively, suggest that as many as 800 Japanese citizens could have been kidnapped. These individuals were not always taken from Japanese soil. Some, like Keiko Aramoto, were abducted while studying or traveling in Europe. The methods were varied, often opportunistic, with victims sometimes lured with false promises or simply overpowered and taken by force, often in broad daylight or from seemingly secure locations. The primary motives behind these abductions were, chillingly pragmatic from the perspective of the North Korean regime. Abducted Japanese citizens were forced to teach Japanese language and culture to North Korean intelligence operatives, enabling them to better infiltrate South Korea and Japan. Another key purpose was identity theft. The abductees' identities were stolen and used by spies to create convincing fake passports and backgrounds. In some instances, North Korean agents even married abductees to produce children who could also be trained as spies, possessing a seemingly authentic Japanese heritage. The callousness of using human lives as mere tools for espionage is a hallmark of this state-sponsored crime. The discrepancy between the officially recognized number and the potentially much larger true number of victims creates an ongoing challenge for investigators and for the families still searching for missing loved ones. For every confirmed case, there are many more families who live with the gnawing uncertainty of whether their missing relative also fell prey to North Korean agents. The Japanese police continue to investigate old missing person files, re-examining them for any possible links to North Korea. The hope is that more cases can be officially recognized, bringing some measure of acknowledgement to these families, even if the path to resolution remains incredibly difficult and fraught with diplomatic obstacles. Section 6. Faces of the Abducted, Stories of Heartbreak and Endurance. Among the many tragic stories, the case of Megumi Yokota stands as one of the most prominent and heartbreaking symbols of the abduction issue. Megumi was just 13 years old when she was kidnapped in November 1977 in Niigata Prefecture. She was walking home from her school's badminton practice when she vanished without a trace. For years, her parents, Saki and Shigeru Yokota, searched tirelessly for her, distributing flyers and appealing for information. North Korea initially denied any knowledge of Megumi. Later, during the 2002 disclosures, they claimed she had married a South Korean abductee and had a daughter, but then alleged she had died by suicide in 1994. This claim was met with disbelief by her family. The subsequent provision of what North Korea purported to be Megumi's cremated remains, which DNA testing proved to be false, only deepened the family's conviction that she might still be alive. Megumi would be 60 years old in 2025. Her mother, Saki Yokota, now 89, has become a leading voice in the movement for the abductees' return, displaying incredible resilience despite her advanced age and immense sorrow. Megumi's father, Shigeru, campaigned alongside his wife for decades until his passing in 2020. Their younger son, Takuya Yokota, has now taken on a leadership role in the Association of Families of Victims Kidnapped by North Korea, continuing the fight and emphasizing the urgency as the parents of the abductees are aging rapidly. Another poignant case is that of Keiko Aramoto. She was 23 years old and studying English in London when she was lured to Copenhagen in 1983 by individuals connected to North Korean operatives under the false pretense of a job offer. From there, she was abducted to North Korea. Her parents, Akihiro and Kyoko Aramoto, fought for decades to bring her home. North Korea claimed that Keiko, along with her husband and child, also abductees, died in a gas poisoning accident in November 1988, even before the 2002 summit. They provided no credible evidence to support this claim, and her family never accepted it. Tragically, Keiko's father, Akihiro Aramoto, passed away on February 14, 2025, at the age of 96, without ever seeing his daughter again. His death underscored the immense emotional toll and the race against time faced by the families. Following Mr. Aramoto's passing, Saki Yokota became the only surviving parent among the families of the 12 officially recognized abductees who have not yet returned to Japan. The stories of Megumi and Keiko, alongside others who were kidnapped while simply walking to a knitting class or while on vacation, highlight the randomness and cruelty of these abductions, tearing apart ordinary lives and leaving behind decades of unresolved grief and a desperate yearning for reunion. Section 7. Renewed Resolve, Japan's Diplomatic Push for Return. The Japanese government, across successive administrations, has consistently stated that the resolution of the abduction issue is a national priority. This commitment has seen renewed emphasis under the current leadership. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, who took office in late 2024, has expressed a strong determination to make tangible progress. He has repeatedly stated his willingness to meet directly with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, without preconditions, to discuss the abductions and seek a path towards the return of all remaining victims. This proactive stance signals a desire to break the long-standing deadlock that has characterized negotiations with Pyongyang on this sensitive matter. On May 24, 2025, Prime Minister Ishiba reiterated his intention to pursue a summit with Kim Jong-un, highlighting the urgency of the situation given the advanced age of the abductees' parents. The Japanese government views the resolution of the abduction issue as a critical component for any potential normalization of relations with North Korea. This stance is rooted in the 2002 Japan DPRK Pyongyang Declaration, which outlined a framework for addressing outstanding issues, including abductions, nuclear ambitions, and missile development, as prerequisites for establishing diplomatic ties. The government believes that a comprehensive resolution is necessary for regional stability and lasting peace. Minister Hayashi Yoshimasa, who serves as the minister in charge of the abduction issue, plays a key role in coordinating the government's efforts. He frequently meets with the families of the abductees, listens to their concerns, and works to keep the issue at the forefront of Japan's domestic and international agenda. The government has also engaged in public awareness campaigns, both within Japan and internationally. For instance, on March 6, 2025, a full-page article by the Japanese government detailing the abductions and calling for their resolution was published in the Washington Post. This followed a similar initiative in the New York Times in 2022, demonstrating a consistent effort to garner global attention and support. Despite these efforts, North Korea continues to maintain that the abduction issue has already been resolved. Pyongyang insists that it abducted only 13 individuals, not the 17 recognized by Japan, that 5 were returned, and that the remaining 8 have died. They refuse to engage in further substantive discussions on the matter, creating a significant diplomatic impasse. The Japanese government, however, refuses to accept this position, pointing to the lack of credible evidence for the alleged deaths and the strong possibility that other abductees, beyond the officially recognized list, remain unaccounted for. The challenge is immense, requiring persistent diplomatic pressure and innovative strategies. Section 8. Global echoes international support for the abductees. Japan's quest for the return of its abducted citizens has not been a solitary one. It has garnered significant international support over the years. The United States, in particular, has been a steadfast ally in highlighting this grave human rights violation. Successive U.S. presidents have expressed their support for Japan's position and have met with the families of the abductees to offer solace and solidarity. President Joe Biden, during his visit to Tokyo in May 2022, held an emotional meeting with these families, reaffirming America's commitment to helping resolve the issue. This bipartisan support from Washington has been crucial in keeping international pressure on North Korea. Former U.S. President Donald Trump also took a personal interest in the abduction issue. He famously mentioned the story of Megumi Yokota in his address to the United Nations General Assembly in 2017, bringing her case to a global stage. Furthermore, President Trump raised the abduction issue directly with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un during their historic summits. More recently, in February 2025, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba reportedly secured full support from former President Trump for Japan's efforts to resolve the abductions, indicating continued backing regardless of changes in U.S. administrations. Such high-level advocacy helps to ensure the issue is not forgotten amidst other geopolitical concerns. Beyond the United States, Japan has actively sought and received support from various other countries and international organizations. The United Nations has repeatedly addressed the abductions in its human rights reports and resolutions concerning North Korea. The UN Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, in its landmark 2014 report, concluded that North Korea had committed systematic and widespread human rights violations, including abductions, constituting crimes against humanity. This finding provided a strong legal and moral basis for international condemnation and calls for accountability, urging Pyongyang to provide full disclosure and repatriate any surviving abductees. Japan continues to collaborate closely with the international community, urging other nations to raise the abduction issue in their bilateral dealings with North Korea and in multilateral forums. The government emphasizes that this is not just a bilateral issue between Japan and North Korea, but a universal concern involving fundamental human rights, state sovereignty, and international law. The sustained international focus helps to isolate North Korea on this matter and reinforces the message that the world has not forgotten the victims. The hope is that this collective pressure will eventually compel Pyongyang to engage constructively and allow for the immediate return of all abductees. Section 9. An Unending Vigil. The Quest for Truth and Homecoming. The passage of time has done little to ease the pain for the families of Japan's abducted citizens. Decades have passed since their loved ones were stolen, yet their vigil continues with unwavering determination. Today, May 29, 2025, marks another day that these families live with uncertainty and longing. The aging of the victims' parents is a stark reminder of the urgency of the situation. Many, like Akihiro Aramoto and Shigeru Yokota, have passed away without witnessing the return of their children, a profound tragedy that fuels the resolve of those who remain. The remaining parents, now elderly and frail, cling to the hope of a reunion in their lifetime. The Japanese government and various advocacy groups continue their relentless efforts. Rallies are still held, petitions are signed, and stories are shared to ensure that the abductees are never forgotten. The younger generation, like Takuya Yokota, has stepped up to carry the torch, ensuring the campaign for justice transcends generations. They demand not only the return of any surviving abductees but also a full and truthful accounting from North Korea regarding the fate of all victims. This includes credible explanations for those alleged to have died, verifiable evidence, and the return of any actual remains, unlike the deceptive attempts of the past. The international community's continued support remains vital. While diplomatic efforts face significant hurdles due to North Korea's intransigence, sustained global pressure sends a clear message that these crimes against humanity cannot be ignored or excused. The pursuit of accountability for those responsible for orchestrating and carrying out these abductions is also a crucial aspect of seeking justice. The families deserve to know the complete truth, no matter how painful, and see those who caused their suffering held responsible. This quest is not just about reuniting families. It is about upholding fundamental principles of human dignity and national sovereignty. The untold story of Japan's abducted citizens is one of profound sorrow, state-sponsored cruelty, and incredible human resilience. As long as even one abductee remains unaccounted for, or their fate unclarified, the struggle will persist. The hope for a breakthrough, for a moment when North Korea finally chooses a path of honesty and allows these stolen lives to return home, endures. Until that day, the families, supported by their nation and sympathetic voices worldwide, will continue their unwavering demand for answers, for justice, and for the simple human right of a family to be whole again, even after so many years of forced separation and pain.